Hey guys, welcome back to do another episode of I Am Legion for Dying Light 1 and 2. My name is Jason, the creator of I Am Legion for Dying Light 1 and 2, and I wanted to talk about some of the upcoming features along with the latest features in the 1.2 update. So there have been a ton of changes, I think well over 400 commits for this changes between 1.1 and 1.2, and I wanted to try to go through and show you some gameplay and also talk about some of those changes and continue to have that discussion of how is it going in the Dying Light 2 game community, and what are those changes, and what are you guys looking forward to seeing? What will help keep you guys a part of this community, and what will bring you guys back for more content? So as the game has continued on, I've noticed that there has been a pretty severe drop off of players. I am looking to create custom content and bring that player base back. So first I'm going to talk about some of the upcoming changes that will be coming into 1.2. So originally they were supposed to release with 1.2, but after so many new updates, I wanted to make sure that the names were not super confusing for people. I think we were at like version I at one point there. And so because of that, I wanted to continue to get in those changes and allow that change log to reflect where the mod was and what was the status of development. So 1.2 released this week. And for that, as always, I'm going to kind of play the game and talk about the game as we go. And 1.2 was the Warzones update. And so the point of the Warzones update was to try to go throughout the world and make the world more interesting and bring that really to life. And so there are still the three different difficulties. Casual Survivor is meant to allow vanilla players, people who already enjoy the features that are in the current game, to allow them to enjoy all the new features that have been added to the game, while Survivor is meant to bring you into what the mod should be, which is lore-driven, lore-friendly driven, more difficult gameplay with a lot of new features. So at this point, after the release of 1.0 into now 1.2, there have been well over probably 7 to 8 major features. So I think the last count was 11 major features added to the game. And these are all meant to allow the player to experience something new in their playthrough of Dying Light 2. If you're still part of the Dying Light 2 community, especially now that the mod tools have been released, I'm going to continue to focus my attention on creating more content for the base game instead of focusing on custom content, which is what the map editor actually is. So it allows you to go in there and create custom content for the game that you cannot play on the base game. And so because of that, I'm going to continue to work on this base game and continue to provide these updates. Some of the things that I worked on was this idea of creating a more interesting world. So you really only have the factions that are in the original game. You have the PK, you have the survivors, you have the Colonel's men, but they don't really have a presence inside the world. They don't really mean a lot as you start to play the game, and a lot of people have gotten on and given me feedback about what they wish they had done with the original base game. To try to support that with Warzones, I've tried to go through and actually make them feel like they have a better presence in the world. And so the idea is that as you're exploring the world, you should see a sharper contrast between these groups, and have them actually create a more interesting environment. So they should now be able to throw UV flares, decoys, grenades, amongst their throwing knives and stones. But the idea is that originally what I had planned for 1.2 was to update the diverse Z's. So the diverse Z's is the overhaul for the actual visuals for the zombies. And as you travel around the world, you will actually see. So we're around for the zombies themselves. We're at about, I think, 1,200 new zombie appearances added to the world. So the base game supports around 32 to 50 zombie models. Currently, with the mod, there is around 1,100 new models for the zombies. to try to create a more interesting and diverse world. So as you travel around the world, this is currently using the survival or the ultimate survivor version of the mod, and so they're all runners and climbers. But you can change that in the config. But back to the main part. So diverse seas has been refined and updated to try to make that a better experience with less glitching, with less little here and there. There were examples of models that had some weird effects. There were models that were completely missing, causing the dreaded invisible zombie glitch. There are still one or two in the game, so I've been going file by file and trying to clean these out. There are some still in the game, but I promise that those will continue to be weeded out with these future updates. So Diverse Seas has been updated to give you a better experience as you travel through the world, give you something more visually interesting. A lot of this has been disabled for the holiday event. So whenever there's an event that takes place inside the Dying Light 2 world, with the release that Techland does into the game, certain parts of the mod will actually be disabled. And so if you're playing during an event, please stand by, wait till the end of that event to continue to test and find out if it's a good fit for you, because not everything is currently active inside the game. So with some of those new systems, so there are now a good amount of custom zombies added to the game. So there's an entire biome of creatures that I'm adding to the swamp area. Currently, there's around 25 new zombies added to the swamp specific regions, and they are meant to help balance some of this exploder or suicider biter. I apologize. So currently, there's only the actual suicider biter, which basically, if they get close to you, they just blow up over and over again. I've always found these super annoying, and so I've gone through and tried to balance out that biome by adding some more interesting visual zombies to that space that will not explode. And so you should have a better balance of actual interesting zombies to fight that they're pretty creepy. I'm pretty excited. Please check the Discord channel to see pictures of those, and you can also check out the live stream where I was actually working on those. But those have been added to the game. There have been updates to the goons since 1.1. So the goons have now received several visual updates as well. Hopefully you guys are enjoying those. Please leave your feedback. I'm always interested to find out how players are experiencing or enjoying those characters or not enjoying those characters. They're really meant to help add immersion to the world. So please let me know if they're not doing that. Along with that is the actual overhaul to the Volatiles as well. So Volatiles actually have received an update as well to make that more interesting as you travel around the world. So you now have 5 new variants for the actual standard Volatiles, and you have 2 new types of Volatiles altogether. Those come in the form of the chemical and spitter, or not, sorry, I apologize, the chemical and venom variant of the Volatiles. And those are meant to each have their own unique traits. They move faster. They are considered the apex predators of the Volatiles. And you basically do not want to tangle with these guys at early levels. So if you are an early level and you happen to see these guys, the venom is jet black with red across his chest. And the chemical will light up in the night. He's all green. He resembles more of the hag. So if you see him inside the world, just know that these are considered top tier enemies, and if you're a lower tier, you should run. So that's with the Volatiles. The Infected now use a fresh variant of the Infected as well, so they also will resemble the biters that I've added to the game. So I've also added that large pull to the game as well. So you should get a nice diverse selection of virals into the world. For the character selection, I've gone through and updated the character selection system to where when you start the game now, you'll get the base, I believe it's 10 males and 10 females. This will allow you to immediately change your appearance based on how you want your playstyle to be. There are new skins that you can unlock by finding them throughout the world. So specifically for the character selection and play the zombie, that has been updated to where you no longer have a ton of stash objects here. So before there was a good long list of different icons here. What I've done is tried to limit this down to where you have male and female, and then you actually have the vanilla unlockable DLC as well. So those have also been added, and they're continuing to get updated. So if you want to find the play the zombie content, all of that has now been added to the actual world loot. So if you want to try to play as the Banshee, you need to execute and kill Banshees. A lot of this is based on level, so you're more likely to find these things if you're playing as higher level versus lower level. So you still have the opportunity to find these things at lower levels, but they're much more rare. So one of the things as I was going through to talk about the armor update that I want to just mention is that they originally, the vanilla style for the armor and the different parts of the loot system in the vanilla version, they basically went through and said, okay, as you progress in level, we're going to turn off low tier and continue to progress the tiers of the weaponry and the armor as you go. I didn't really like this because it really limits the world. It's supposed to be an open world, but if anything, that really curates the content to where you will only find tier 6 things after one level, and you will no longer find tier 1 things after a certain level. That's fine for some, but I really wanted to be able to make the world a little bit more interesting to where you have that sellable loot and you're not constantly finding loot that's balanced with the player. So there is some degree of randomization there. You should be able to find more and more of that random armor as you go to where you find the lower tier and the higher tier. So moving on to the bases, so another major update with the human AI, and the reason I've kind of lingered around here is that the bases have been now brought online, and so they are no longer static bases with AI that basically are just playing animations and are not moving, not updating. They were just empty shells essentially playing animations. Those have now all been brought online, and so as you travel to the different bases, these bases can actually be assaulted by the infected, by different enemy gangs, different groups. And to help with that, I've actually gone through and upgraded all the guys that are now standing on the walls. So everybody on the wall is now armed with a bow and arrow, and they also have the UV flares. So on top of some visual updates, I have gone in and added back the E3 look to the actual armor, some of the armor elements. I removed some of the more advanced level that I did with this earlier on. I kind of went overboard with making everything they were wearing blue. I kind of dialed that back to give them more subtle blue tones because here shortly there will be an update where I'm going to try to create several new factions to the game and add those to the world, and it will help to clearly differentiate between the PK and those different groups so that you know who's the good guys, who are the bad guys, and which way to run. So blue is the common element that you will always see across the PK bases. So as you're running, if you continue to see this sharp blue color, you know you can run to them for help. They also now throw UV flares into the world. So as you're traveling around, if you see UV flares getting thrown, you know that that's a patrolling PK group. So as you're traveling, that color has also been more sharply impacted here. So the UV flares actually generate a little bit more of a glow or an intense glare. And that's meant to signify that it's actually a damaging factor for the infected. It's not just a nice, pretty light, but these things are actually going to do some damage as they cross into these. So along with this, as you have this concept of the bases online, this also means that you can actually upset the entire base. So if you want to actually go through and find out what it's like to upset the entire PK faction, you can actually go in here and start attacking the members of the base. The entire base will turn against you, so it's not highly recommended. I'm actually going to go ahead and first show you some of the interactions with the AI outside the base, and then we'll come back and piss off some of the actual base AI as well, so we can continue to see what those look like. The only thing that has not been implemented for the bases, so currently this base in particular can be raided at night, so you will occasionally, if you come to this base at night, or if you sleep here or fast travel to this location, it can be overrun by zombies. And so those zombies will show up here in the middle area, and the PK will be fighting them off to help signify, raided bases. The traders in the game have been set to invincible and will also no longer run around. So I did play around with trying to get these guys also active in the world, and I'm going to do so again. I just have to write some custom AI again that will always bring them back to this location. I had several people reporting that these guys would go off and actually fight an entire war, and they would follow them around the map and see what damage they did. So I've set them up to where they will stay inside the bases for now, and eventually they'll be back online when I've written that custom AI. So you will also notice that the original helmets for the PK from E3 have also been added back. So you will also see a variant of those helmet styles as you travel around the world as well. So let's go ahead and step back out. It is now officially night, so we can go out here and start seeing what the world is like when we move around. So let's go over here and actually start to bring some of these biters closer to the base here. So we have a viral, some biters. See here we have a nice diverse collection of different biters. And it looks like that one guy came down off the wall here, so I'm gonna have to find our PK guards up here. It actually might be easier to go over here to the other side, and it would probably be a lot easier during the day versus at night. Their vision is actually affected by the darkness, and so unlike the player who can see everything perfectly, these guys actually have some dampeners on their senses, and so nighttime is a little less for human AI. They will sense things and they will eventually attack, but they're a little less sharp at night. So let's see if we can actually find some PK patrols really quickly and see if we can get them active. It's only when you're trying to show off something that doesn't quite go how you expect it. But the bowmen have now been set up to where the bowmen will fire down onto the enemies outside the base, and so they will throw UV flares and fire their bows and arrows down onto the enemies at night. Looks like nighttime they sense they are less likely to sense the enemy, and so it looks like these guys are not actually firing down at night, which are all things that with your guys' feedback and depending on how much how far we want to go with it will be things that will continue to dial in and update as we go. So let's see if I can actually find some PK groups that are patrolling, and we're going to actually head over here to this other base. The flashlight has been upgraded to where the flashlight similar, so a lot of the code got turned on in the vanilla version of the game, and I can confirm that the flashlight does an excellent job of bringing the zombies down on your head. So if you are trying to play stealth, if you are trying to move around the world, the flashlight is the best way to bring down the enemy on top of your head, and so it is recommended that as you're traveling around the world, especially playing Ultimate, that you do so without a flashlight if you can get away with it. And this base in this playthrough is not established yet, and so let me see if there's another base that we can head over to actually upset these guys. So I might have to head back over to this main PK base. Let me head that way, and we'll see what a chase looks like with that base. So as before, the screamer icons have been turned off for Ultimate Survivor, so you are less likely to see them as you move throughout the world. Their spawns have also been turned down, so you're less likely to see them in the world. And so as you're traveling, make sure to keep an eye out because they are less common. There is currently a bug inside the vanilla game where the volatiles, for some reason, believe that they are indoors. And so you will actually get a very limited amount of volatiles that will actually chase you right now in the mod. And this is true of the standard game as well. As you start to move through the world, they will... some will attack you, some will chase you, and then some will run away as well. And so you kind of have to balance how many can chase you at any given time. And I'll continue to try to fix this issue. But I'm hoping that the 1.83 update, which should be coming shortly, will help balance that out. So let's head back towards the base. Here's one of the updated visuals. So the volatiles now have variants that are covered in ash and covered in mud. So the mud variants will also be added to the swamp area. And so as we continue to dial in the swamp area, I'll also be adding them as well, and in the hope that you end up with a creepier area where they are having, or where they're able to sneak up on the player. So there's the ash variant. And you can see here that the PK are firing down on these guys as we run around. There's also one that I've added that has these hag slashes on there. So that's meant to represent that they got into a fight with a hag. And so they actually have these hag cuts across their bodies, which is kind of fun. Let's go ahead and switch back to Dawn. So let's continue to go through the different features of the game. So next, to talk about some of the changes on here is the reinforcement summoning tools. So I recently released a video so that you guys could see what that effect does. So on top of that, all custom factions are now able to actually contact each other and call for reinforcements. Originally, with the base game, only one faction, the Bandits, could ever actually call for reinforcements. When the Renegades called for reinforcements, they would actually call Bandits, and so Bandits would show up for the Renegades. This was very confusing early on in the game. And so because of that, that's now been changed to where the Renegades will actually flood the world as they call for reinforcements, and they are made to where they will now try to box in the player. So as more and more reinforcements are called, they will continue to take to the rooftops and try to box in the player down below or slowly move in from all directions. And so this is meant to help block in the character and make that world a little bit more daunting than it originally was. For the PK, they are now able to call in reinforcements specific to their group as well. So they should start arriving around the scene, and they have various tiers. So there are currently 6 different tiers of reinforcements that can arrive on site. And so as you encounter the different groups, commandos are able to bring in the best reinforcements. So there are PK commandos now, and they are able to call in larger groups to defend the commandos as well. They are not able to call in the different commandos, so at any one time you will only ever have up to 6 or 7 commandos at any given time inside the play space. So with the human AI, this has also been upgraded. It still needs some additional work. But basically the idea is that if they detect that there are biters around, they will actually throw those UV flares towards biters now. Previously, it was if they had determined that it was an enemy. I've tried to work with this to actually make it to where they identify that they're biters. This is all custom code, and so I'm not sure that it's working entirely as expected, but it is getting better. And please continue to lend your feedback and let me know how you're liking these new features. But the PK patrols will now throw UV flares and will not throw grenades as they were doing previously. And so as they travel around the world, they have a much more likely chance of taking out these biters. And so they're actually a bigger threat to contend with for these biters inside the world. They will also use grouping. So as you move throughout the world, they will identify you as an ally. So if they see you inside the space and you're under attack, they should move to your location to start to try to help. And then if they see each other throughout the environment, they will also group with each other and try to help defend each other inside that environment as well. They should also start to identify threats a little bit better. So you can see here that they actually still threw a UV flare. So not perfect yet, still being dialed in. But I appreciate your guys' feedback. Anything that you can do to lend your feedback here will be helpful. And we'll continue to see what we can write for that. So additionally, with the armor update, so the armor has now been fully implemented into the world. I was able to figure out how to do custom names and descriptions. That does not mean that everything has received a proper name or description yet, but what it does mean is that I'm slowly moving through and updating that armor. With that update, I've noticed an influx of people reporting about the lowercase. So that is a issue with the actual engine itself. So a lot of these names are actually pre-baked inside the system, and they're doing this for localization. So as you are setting up a different language across the game, it's actually converting that over to the different text. And so because of that, it's not meant to have this custom text like I'm now inserting. And so because of that, I'm not actually able to do the uppercase letters, which is incredibly frustrating, but it is a better way for you to start to identify when there is a custom object added to the world. So I am trying to go through and add more information. So you can see down here, an example with this paraglider is that we do have the item bonus. It's showing the stats of what are being done, but I haven't gone through and added custom text to actually define what those things are. And so that will be coming here soon as well. So with the holiday event, more people have reported that they were not able to actually get any of the custom armors. So just know that that is probably due to the event itself. So as we continue to have events, please know that some of those features will continue to not work as well or not work at all. Please just let me know and give me a heads up. But for the most part, after the event takes place, that feature should fix itself and return. If it does not, then we're going to have to continue to work through it. But as these updates in general continue to roll, it always comes down to balancing. So we'll continue to balance and play with this. And so your feedback, as always, is appreciated here to continue to balance out this mod. In addition, so we talked about the armor. So in addition, there are several new items added to the game. So I actually realized that I failed to mention the upcoming features first. So I'll actually cap off the video with talking about those features that will be coming after this release of 1.1.2. But with some of those feature updates, you will notice that there is now food added to the world. So there are also food items and water added to the world, along with some new healing items. So if you find food inside the world, this is early stage work that's going towards a survival mode that is being developed. So that will allow you to have thirst and hunger if you actually want that. So that will be an optional for the mod here down the road. And that is currently under development. So currently that food will cause your player to heal. I've set that to be much less likely to occur. And so you're more likely to not encounter the food than you were when I first released it. Thank you guys again for your feedback and for testing out that version with food and water. I appreciate it. So I'll continue to be balancing this and continue to move forward on that survival mode. But also additionally with that comes the ability to have alcohol in the game. So alcohol has also been added. So there's actually 5 different types of alcohol. You have beer, you have wine, whiskey, vodka, and I know I'm missing one more. Oh, I accidentally struck these guys and now the whole base is angry. So I guess now is a good time to show you guys the balancing for the world. So previously there were some issues reported with the PK sighting against you without any provocation. That has been addressed for the most part, but when you do go through and strike a PK in the world, just know you can now upset and piss off a base. You need to leave the area and come back later kind of thing, and they will forget over time. I've also turned on a feature that was disabled by the developers, which will allow you to actually gain or lose points based on killing different factions around the world. So just know that that is turned on. I'm waiting for your guys' feedback to know whether or not that's actually changing things. But essentially, they really only wrote the code for the PK. So the PK are really the only faction where you have a point system that can be affected. I've tried to add the code for survivors and for the bandits and Colonel's men, but I'm not sure if that's actually working as expected, and I'll continue to test for that. But as you can see, they're a great shot, and they're manning the walls now, and that group is now is actually meant to defend their base, and so you will encounter that throughout the world. So to move on a little bit, so with some of the additional features, as I mentioned, we have custom AI, we have the armor system has been updated, we have the actual system set up where we're now getting the custom bandits and the custom biters, sorry about that, and then the infected in general. Those are continuing to be dialed in. And then additionally, coming up, we will have three major updates. So the one that is currently underway is the update to the base building. So I've been working on an experimental branch for a little while now, which basically allows you to build bases inside the game. This has pretty much gone very well. I like the concept. It's actually pretty easy to set up and support, something I'm going to continue to build for. But one of the challenges that I've run into is that there's really not the idea of destroying prefabs in the game. So creating them is one thing, but if you accidentally place one where you don't want it, the system is actually set up pretty well to be able to remember where those objects are set up as far as new bases and that kind of thing. The bigger challenge is that if you accidentally place an object in the wrong position, you have a much harder time going through and actually removing that item from the world. And so I'm continuing to try to set that up to where, or I'm continuing to look for options as far as setting up the world to where you can actually remove those things, and that will probably come in the form. So currently what I've been looking at is adding a specific weapon to the game that is kind of a hammer, if you will, to break down reinforcements and that kind of thing. And so continuing to look at that solution. It's not a solution yet, and so I'm continuing to look at it, and hopefully I'll have an update for that. Another update is the companion update. So I've had great success getting the companions working inside the game. I'm pretty confident that that code is working as expected. So how that code is meant to work is that companions will join you, that you can get lower tier companions, you could get legendary companions, and they're meant to be added to the world. And once they're actually added to the world, they're meant to just kind of exist inside that world. And so you can bring them into a base, you can bring them into an area, and they will continue to follow you around that space. If they lose you, if they're not able to keep up, then they will actually respawn back to the original location. I think this is a pretty good compromise for having AI inside the world that are not meant to always follow you. So if they can't keep up, they kind of go back to their initial starting point and will continue to hang out in that environment until they find you again. So if you go back to that space, they'll continue to follow, kind of thing. With some of that is the ability to actually get these guys to scale and move around the world. So in some of these cases in Old Villador, you have much shorter buildings. Because you have the shorter buildings, you're less likely to encounter a lot of the scaling and climbing issues. I have gone through and updated the AI code to where now you have unique code for each one of the factions. Along with this is the ability to determine whether or not they are wearing gear that will keep them from being able to climb very readily. And so each one is allowed to climb at a certain rate or prefers climbing. And so if you had like a two-handed PK, he was much more likely to climb these buildings and move throughout this environment than some of the other factions. And so I'll continue to be updating that, but that is another reason that the Renegades, as they move throughout the world, are able to climb much faster and able to move much faster throughout the environment, while the PK themselves are a little bit slower and less likely to climb around the environment as well as a Renegade. And so I'm continuing to dial that in, but basically it's a lot more easy to distance yourself from a PK and continue to move throughout the world. They won't chase you quite as well as some of the other factions will. But as you can see here, this is a great example of where you can upset them inside the world and then return to that fight if you so choose. So I think another big update that I've been hearing a lot of people have been asking for is the Bandit Overhaul. So that is continuing to be set up. A lot of the challenges I found there was splitting out the actual faction code and getting that to where it was working as intended. So I am going through and I have plans for about 5 different Bandit factions that will be joining the world along with their own custom visuals. Those will show up in the world in the form of encounters and random spawns, and that will allow you to actually feel like they're randomly arriving inside the world, a little less scripted and more interesting for the open world approach. So additionally to that, I have gone through and updated a lot of the config settings. So thank you guys for joining the Discord community and continuing to support and also report issues that you see inside the game. So with that, the config continues to chug along and have more features added as we go. I've also upgraded the Discord channel to where it's a little bit easier to add these configs and share them. And so if you have a config that you've set up that has a playstyle that you like, if you want to call it a different difficulty, however you want to set that up, you can. And so that way other people can experience your solution. I think I see a custom goon here, so I'm going to actually head down so you guys can see that as well. This one's actually one of my favorites. And that's actually something that I will also be looking at, is this idea of the attack distances. I know a few people have reported that some of the distances do not seem to be properly balanced with some of these special infected, and so I'll continue to be dialing that in as well, along with some of the visuals for like the actual goon weapons and that kind of thing. They're getting there, slowly getting some things dialed in, but please bear with me, and again, as always, feedback is appreciated. On top of the alcohol, so I stopped when talking about some of the new things. So on top of the alcohol and food items, along with the water, there are also new bandages and med kits added to the world. So this is meant to help with some of the changes that I've made. So I know a lot of people were reporting that this medicine bandage that you upgrade is sometimes harder to make because of the requirements that are put on there when you're crafting. To help with some of this, I've gone through and made this to where you now have the idea of medicine, which is mainly herb based. As most of you know, with the honey and chamomile and that kind of thing. But I've also created the concept of basic bandages. So you have a basic bandage which has a very small amount of healing. You have a clean bandage. So a clean bandage actually uses alcohol to sterilize the bandages, and that will do a little bit better healing. You also now have actual military grade med kits as well, and so you can craft those in the world, along with aspirin and morphine. So if you find those in the world, they're no longer just valuables. You can actually use them as healing objects as well. A lot of the crafting system has been upgraded to try to add more detail and more descriptions along with names to the different things that I've added. So please keep me posted on how things are going with the different balancing and the expanded loot system. I know that a couple people have mentioned that it has become a little bit more cluttered in your inventories, but those are things that I want to continue to support and figure out the best way to make that easier to navigate. Obviously, we don't want to add too much to your inventories, but we do want you to be able to continue to find items in the world and make that more interesting. So inside your stash, you should find a basic bandage blueprint. That's what I just activated, and that should allow you to craft basic bandages. So from the get-go, you should be able to go in there and create these basic bandages once you arrive at your first stash. So please let me know how that goes and use that new bandage. And hopefully that will mitigate some of the new requirements for the original bandages and the upgrades as they go. So as these continue to get better, you can always turn to these regular bandages and food and the different items, morphine, aspirin, that kind of thing for healing. So in addition to some of the things coming up as far as different features, I have been working on some light overhauls. So I'm also working on an upgrade for the actual lighting systems, along with the flashlight, different flashlight upgrades, along with throwable glow sticks, flares, that kind of thing for better searching buildings and dark areas at night, along with some new consumables and new weapons that I'm working on that I'm hoping to get over to you guys with probably 1.3. But I look forward to hearing your guys' feedback. So this mod will continue to roll forward towards 1.3 with updates. So as you continue to see the different versions release, you can use the uninstaller to just run the installer again and select that new update, and you should be good to go. If you have a problem, please refer to the installer install and config guide. That is currently the best knowledge source for the best way to navigate the config file, along with how to use that installer. So I will be continuing to put out an update here in the future for another video, but I think for now that one does cover the basics of how to get everything set up, along with some of the more common questions that I've had. I look forward to hearing from you guys some more. Thank you guys so much for being a part of the community and giving your feedback for the mod. I appreciate it. Thank you again, and a huge shout out to all my Patreon supporters for continuing to support this mod and continue to see this through. I really do appreciate that. Big shout out. Thank you guys. And I look forward to the next coming update and hearing from you guys on the Discord. Take care and happy holidays, everyone.